Hello everyone, I'm Georgia and this is The Sound of Georgia. Today we're going to be talking about the sound of music. Well, what did you expect? My channel has the name it does for a reason. Today, however, I'm going to be talking about the stage version of The Sound of Music and what things from it I like better than the movie. Yes, there are some. And yes, there are far more things that the film has that I prefer over the musical. But because there's so many more of them, we're just going to be talking about musical over film. So Rodgers and Hammerstein called it The Sound of Music for a reason, so we're going to start by talking about the music. One of my favourite things, pun intended, about the stage version of The Sound of Music is the songs. Specifically, the songs that aren't in the film. This not only includes How Can Love Survive and No Way to Stop It, the two songs Max and Elsa sing that were cut from the film, but also the intros on some songs. Namely, the title song and the reprise of 16 Going on 17. The Sound of Music is my favourite song from The Sound of Music, and it has an introductory verse that does not appear in the film.
My day in the hills has come to an end. I know a star has come out to tell me it's time to go. But deep in the dark green shadows are voices that urge me to stay. So I pause and I wait and I listen for one more song, for one more lovely thing that the hills might say.
Beginning the film with Maria lying on the ground or on the mountain somewhere would not have been nearly as impactful as the sweeping shot that does open the film. But you can't have the song start at the very beginning if you're going to open the movie with her twirling. So, while I can absolutely understand why this was cut from the film, it's perfect for the stage version because the stage version doesn't actually open on the mountain. It opens with the nuns. So as far as that song goes, I prefer the version we see in the musical, but only lyrics-wise. Nobody can sing like Julie can. Now, the reprise for 16 Going on 17 has a similar thing, both in terms of how I feel about it and just song-wise. 16 Going on 17 is probably one of my least favourite songs and scenes in the whole show. Whenever I watch the film, that scene drags for me. And by drags, I mean I feel like I'm watching it on speed 12 instead of speed 16, or 24. Seriously, every time I watch the movie I'm like, we're up to the Lendler now? Weren't we just at the wedding? How are we getting over the mountains now? So while 16 Going on 17 doesn't do much for me, and that's by Sound of Music standards, I love everything in it, completely and utterly, I prefer the reprise much more. And my favourite part of the reprise is the bit that gets cut from the film.
A bell is no bell till you ring it. A song is no song till you sing it. And love in your heart wasn't put there to stay. Love isn't love till you give it away.
The weird thing is though, on the soundtrack for the film, the 16 Going on 17 reprise actually has that introductory verse. And it's definitely Julie singing. That makes me really want to hear Julie sing the entirety of The Sound of Music. But I guess that's impossible now. I don't know why they cut this from the film. I think the scene would work exactly the same if they had left it in. But not having it in means it's something I can add to the list of things I like better about the musical. So, yay! So, as far as songs that were completely cut from the film, there's obviously How Can Love Survive and No Way to Stop It. I heard they cut these from the film because they wanted to separate Max and Elsa from Maria and Georg and the children, because they're not part of the family. And even though they're only in the stage version, these are still awesome songs. I love them both. The day before I went to see Sound of Music on stage, I listened to these songs over and over and over and over again, because I knew they would be in the stage version and I hadn't heard them before. I don't know why it took me that long to get around to listening to them, but I'm so glad I did because they're awesome. Another reason I imagine they were cut was because Elsa and Georg's relationship in the musical is quite different from what it is in the film. It's much more politically driven, or at least politically dependent. And while How Can Love Survive could have been slotted straight into the film, the scene's still there, they just cut the song. No Way to Stop It is a little bit different. It's all about the politics. So with all this talk of Max and Elsa's songs, let's actually talk about Max and Elsa. I love Elsa. I think she's an awesome character, even if she does chase Maria out. Except Brigitte did that in the stage version. Anyway, back to Elsa. It's actually hard to say whether I like Elsa, and Max for that matter too, more on stage or on screen. They're both very similar and they're both very different at the same time. Though I'd have to say Max and Elsa in the stage version probably edge out Max and Elsa in the film version just slightly. But I don't actually think that's because of the characters. I think it's because of the musical itself and how different it is from the film. The musical's much more cheesy, and I feel like that better suits their characters. Though as far as Elsa in a Love Triangle goes, Eleanor Parker kills it. So I love Max and Elsa in both versions pretty much equally, but it almost seems like they're easier to like in the stage version, if that makes sense. And I think it is because how different the musical is in tone from the film. But the next thing I prefer in the musical over the movie is about another character. Frau Schmidt, the housekeeper. Do you remember her? I honestly wouldn't blame you if you did. She's got 2 scenes in the whole movie. Granted, she doesn't have a lot of scenes on the stage, but we still get to see a lot more of her. I like seeing her comments on how Georg uses the whistle. I like seeing her help the children get ready for the party. I like seeing her ask Max for help when her Zella comes around at the end. It's definitely the fanfiction nut in me, but she would do all those things. So I like that we see her do those things. Seriously, poor Norma Varden. She would have been there on day 1, because My Favourite Things was the first scene they filmed, and then she wouldn't have been needed for God knows when, only for another day. And yet she's not a character you can really cut. And the final thing I think the musical has over the film is Georg. No, I don't mean the character. Georg has a lot more problems in the musical than he does in the film. Thank you, Christopher Plummer, for insisting there were some changes. What I mean is Maria actually calls him Georg. If you go back and watch the film, you never hear Julie's Maria call him by his name. So while the sentences themselves can actually be a bit awkward and cheesy, I do like that she calls him Georg. Granted, it's nothing like when she calls him Georg in the anime. We get to see the first time she's ever used his name in that, and that is just... I love it so much. I can sort of see why they changed this for the film, or at least come up with a reason why, and that would be like Max and Elsa being separate from the rest of the family by not singing. They wanted to keep it separate, but I don't really know why they would do that, or even if that's why they did it. Nevertheless, in the stage version, she calls him Georg a number of times, and that means a lot to me because they're my OTP. I love them. So that's everything for today. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen The Sound of Music on stage. Is there anything you like better in the musical than you did in the film, or vice versa? If you haven't seen the movie, get out now. If you haven't seen the movie, turn this off right this second and go and watch it. Come back and watch the end of this in 3 hours. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in my video next week. So long, farewell!